Hi guys, today I have a friend of mine, her name is Elisa. She is a top model in Chicago, and before we start the interview I want her to talk about her life story. When I have heard it, I was like so touched, so I asked her if she can share this information to my audience, to my YouTube subscribers. So today she is here with me and she will share her story.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Alyssa. My story. So I am first generation Italian, born and raised in Chicago, but my entire dad's side of the family is from Italy, Calabria and Sicily. So I grew up in a very Italian cultured household. I mean, we spoke Italian, everyone was literally fresh off the boat. My parents, growing up, were not together, so I grew up with my dad's side of the family. My grandmother is actually the one who raised me, so I looked at her as my mom. My birth mom I did see occasionally growing up, kind of more like on holidays. It was just a very complex situation. She had a lot going on in her life, and it was not necessarily the best thing for a kid to be surrounded by. So my grandmother kind of kept me in a little bubble and adopted me as like her fourth child, which I was super grateful for. My dad used to travel a lot when I was super young, so he was a salesman. He was gone like 4 days a week, so me and my grandmother were like this. She unfortunately passed away 9 years ago now, which is crazy to think because it feels like yesterday. But she was a saint. So I grew up in the city. We eventually moved out to the burbs, went to school in the burbs. My father was, and I don't like using that word because, I think the terms mom and dad get used so loosely. Like, just because you have a kid, that doesn't make you a mom or a dad. There's so much more entailed to it. So I actually, it's a little vulgar, but I use the term sperm donor because that's kind of really all he was. He was abusive and narcissistic, and it was an extremely toxic household. Once we moved out of my grandparents' house, and especially after my grandmother passed away, it was just me and him. And that transition of not having a role of someone who is protective over you and just having to like kind of cower down and live in this toxic environment. I mean, it was one extreme to the next. And so my, middle school years and high school years were awful in the sense that I wasn't allowed to, do anything. I wasn't allowed to have a phone. I wasn't allowed to hang out with friends. I wasn't allowed to wear skinny jeans. Everything had to be like baggy. Like, I was controlled beyond control. And it was awful. And so I knew when I turned 18 that I needed to get out. I despised him from the age of 10. I mean, I knew it wasn't normal. I didn't grow up, it wasn't like that when I was younger, especially not around my grandmother. She wouldn't have put up with that. So it was a rough several years, but I made it through. Yeah. So as soon as I turned 18, I packed up and left. 2 weeks before moving out, had gotten into a near fatal car accident. Fortunate to be obviously here today, but it was very, very close to not. So I didn't have a car, is where I was going with that. So I moved out without a car. I moved out without, I had my own savings. I worked at Starbucks for a few years, and that's all I had. So I literally just left on a whim because I couldn't take it anymore. And lived with a girlfriend for 2 months, got my own place, ended up buying a new car, and kind of from there, I mean, everything where I am now, I've gotten to this point by myself, which I take huge credit for because, I mean, so many people are so fortunate to have families that they have that support and, are appreciative of it, and I think that's great too, but it also has been a lesson for me to appreciate things even more because I know that I've had to work for them. So, I mean, I've worked my ass off the last 4 or 5 years just to live the lifestyle that I live now. I'm comfortable. I've been married for almost 4 years. I have a wonderful house, car. I mean, I'm in the perfect setup, but I came from nothing is what I'm trying to say. I left a very toxic environment and made something of myself. And so, if you find yourself to be in this position, or you feel as if, you're stuck, just know that there's always a way out. You just have to have the willpower to do it, I think, essentially. Don't be afraid to make the jump.
Yeah, you just have to always take the challenge, and I like the way they say, follow your fear. If you're afraid, just go, just do it.
Yeah, you don't want to live with what ifs. I think that's the worst thing, because you never want to look back with a regret. At least you can say you tried it, and if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. I think that kind of goes with anything in life, whether that's your dream job or a relationship or moving out of a toxic household. I mean, try it. No regrets.
So Alisa, tell us about you, how you started your modeling career and how you got to work with the best agencies in the city.
Okay. I was 8 when I did my first headshots, and of course, at 8, I was already like 5 feet tall. So they thought that I was a lot older than I actually was, and they're like, okay, she looks great, but she's way too young to be doing anything yet. Like, she looks like she's 12, and she's not old enough for any of the preteen stuff. So I let it go, and it was something that was always in the back of my head, but of course, you're still a kid then, so you're not really thinking like, oh my goodness. But you know, I think growing up too, especially in America, watching Disney Channel and stuff, like, oh, like I hope that can be me one day, whether it's acting or on a poster. And so I feel like that's kind of where it stemmed from. And then I went again when I was 14 and went to my first agency here in Chicago. I went to an open call and they signed me right then and there, and that's pretty much where it started. I did a lot of e-commerce work, which is like commercial stuff. I was a client, one of my big clients was Groupon, and so that was a lot of fun. But again, it's more commercial work. So the pay is great, but I like more editorial and runway and high fashion stuff. So started there. I got to do a fall winter collection for a good friend of mine. But from there, I kind of just worked my way up. And then after, I don't know, 3 years, I decided it was time to look to other agencies because I just felt like I kind of hit a wall. Like I was just kind of done. I maxed out everything that I could get out of my first agency and was like, okay, let me explore some options. So I went to a different agency and got signed. Same premise. I went in on an open call. They were interested. Was with them for a little bit, and I felt the same thing again. I was kind of like, okay, like I kind of feel as if I'm resorting back a little bit, and that I need to, you know, move forward. I didn't feel like I was making progress. So I went to another open call. This is all you do is open calls, and you hope for the best.
What does it mean, open call?
So open call is agencies offer like a window of time. Say it's Monday from 3 to 5, and anybody and everybody can walk in that feels they're qualified, and they basically decide whether or not they're interested. So that's open call. So it's pretty much just, there are other ways you can submit your portfolio like online to them. I personally am very face-to-face, so I would like to introduce myself and, you know, show people like my personality, right, versus just me being a picture and a name and an email. I didn't like that. So I went in to this last open call with my agency that I'm currently with, and I could not be happier. Personally, they are the best agency in Chicago, in my opinion. I think they really care for their girls and the clientele that they have. I would not want to be anywhere else, so I'm very fortunate to be with my agency now.
You work now only with one agency?
Yes. So the way that that works in modeling is when you sign a contract, it just depends on the terms. So you can either be, you know, to a certain state, to a certain region, like the Midwest, which will cover the states. So I can be signed in Chicago, and then I can be with a different agency in New York. I can be with a different agency in LA. I was signed in LA. I lived there for 6 months too.
Wow, I didn't know.
Yeah. I did.
That's why I see you sometimes in New York.
Yeah. I was there for 6 months, and I was not a fan, so I moved back home. I'm a Chicago girl at heart. But yeah, so you can be signed in different regions. I just can't be signed to 2 agencies here in Chicago because that's crossing over the territory.
Wow.
Like you're exclusive to the one agency where you live, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have another tricky question. So do you pay percentage to the agency, or they already offer you some amount and they already took the percentage for themselves? Like how does it work
So
USA?
pay pretty much all across the board with the agencies. The model themselves pay 20% to the agency. So you are an independent contractor, everything's on you, so you can, you know, write off your mileage, your travel, your food, your anything related to the job. And then they take 20%. So when I get paid, and the tricky thing about this is that generally there's like a 2 to 3 month waiting period. So I could book a job today and not get paid for 2 to 3 months out. So it's one of those things that when you first start, it's hard because you're waiting several months before getting paid. But once you start working consistently, then the paychecks keep coming in. So it's a 2 to 3 month gap, and then they already take their percentage out when I get the check. So if they're taking 20% out of a $1,000 check, the 200 is already being taken out, I'm getting 800 in the mail.
And you still pay taxes out of that.
And then I have to say 15%-ish for taxes. So it's very much a monitoring system. It's not as nice as a W-2 and just getting it in the bank already taken care of and never worrying about it again. there's a lot that goes into keeping track with it. So the agency takes a cut from the model side, and then I think they take a cut from the client side as well. So that's how they get paid.
Oh.
Because otherwise, I mean, when you think about it, how are they getting paid? So probably roughly 40% that they take out, and that way they can pay all the agents. And my agents work their tushies off. I mean, they are on the clock constantly. You are on your phone, emails, phone calls, text messages. I mean, they never stop. And they, like I said, my agent specifically takes such good care of me, and so they deserve the pay just as much as I do. They're awesome.
Did you have such days when they call you in the middle of the night and they say like, tomorrow we have a shoot and the pay is really good? Would you like to do that? Or it never happens in the USA?
It is pretty much last minute,
Really?
a lot of the time. You're like, I will be at work, and all of a sudden I'll get an email or a phone call and they're like, hey, can you be somewhere in the next hour? And I'm like, yep, absolutely, let's go. I mean, it's very much a last minute. I feel like a lot of it's very last minute, actually. So.
Okay, and I know that you have another job, and how do you cope all of that, your modeling career and your second job, if you want to talk about that?
Sure. I like to dabble in a lot of things, so I can't just like have one job and call it a day. I do several things, but my primary job, I work for a law firm. Yeah, money. I work for a law firm, so I do paralegal work. But I'm fortunate enough to be in a setup that I get my work done kind of at all times. So sometimes I can go in at like 6 in the morning and try and knock everything out, or if I have a shoot during the day and I have deadlines to meet, well, 8 o'clock at night, I'm strolling into the office to compensate for what I missed, and a lot of that comes from the fact that I'm in a good foundation with my boss. I mean, my boss is like a father to me, and he knows how important modeling is, and so he lets me come and go as I please, but again, I put the time in and put the work in. So for me, yeah, it can be stressful. I mean, I could be in the middle of something super important at work or needed to get something done for that day, and next thing I know, I'm out and I'm gone, and it's like, okay, well, I know later on tonight this is going to be a late night. I'm here till midnight, because I have to come back and finish it. But I wouldn't change it. I absolutely love my setup. I'm so lucky.
Okay, I have another question.
Go ahead.
So, do you work directly with the photographers or you work only with the agencies?
Okay, so this is a tricky question because technically both. For bookings and like money-making jobs, it's strictly through the agency. Photographers, because I've been doing this so long, I've kind of created like a group of photographers that I love working with and are willing to, trade their time for pictures, and we enjoy working together. So there are times where, if you want to build your portfolio or just have a fun shoot, that, hey, I reach out to so-and-so and I'm like, hey, let's book a shoot for such, and then we get a team together. You get hair and makeup artists, you get stylists sometimes, you can have a whole team, or it could just be me and the photographer. So I feel like a lot of, they call them test shoots, which is where you take the pictures and just trade your time for print. And so I do a lot of those, but the agencies can also set you up with those. I mean, especially when you first get signed and they want you to rebuild your book or, get more pictures, they'll set you up with photographers, and at that point, generally you pay.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, starting new with an agency, you're investing in yourself essentially, and so it's like starting a business. I mean, you have to put the money and the time in order to start. And yeah, so like when I first got signed, and I had to get pictures done for comp cards, which are like cards that we get to give to clients during a casting, and it's just got a few pictures and your name and your measurements. I paid $500 for my first test shoot, and I mean, you can write it off, it's an expense, but nonetheless, I mean, you're investing in yourself. And so when you first sign with an agency, they'll send you, because we have so many amazing photographers in Chicago, and they deserve the money too. So I'm just very fortunate to
I'll kill you. She touched the mic.
I am just very fortunate to have a setup where I've become friends with a lot of photographers that are willing to shoot and spend time with me without having to pay. So, but pay your photographers, they're worth it.
Okay guys, I will explain to you the system in the USA because I'm just getting to know it here. I know that everywhere in the world it's different. So here you're making some certain amount of money, then you just write off some expenses,
right.
And then you have some amount and you pay taxes out of that amount. So it's a little bit different across the world.
Right, yeah.
So that's why I'm giving an explanation how it works in the USA.
There's a lot that you have to pay attention to. A lot.
Now we want to know if you have penalties in your contract? Because when I used to work in Dubai, my agency would send me a contract and it would be like the list of A4 with lots of penalties. So do you have penalties in your contract?
Absolutely. I mean, and they're generally pretty straightforward. A lot of it is to do with, making sure you pay your agents and the cuts are coming out, making sure that you're not booking work within the Chicagoland area because I'm signed to Chicago without the agents knowing, right? So if someone reaches out to me and is like, hey, I want you to shoot, my personal campaign for $500 today, I can't take that. It needs to go through my agency so they can get the cut. And to make sure too,
it's not fair. Come on, you will become famous and they will be willing to take some money.
I mean, yeah, it's a lot of that too is to make sure that you are getting paid what you're worth, because so many people like to reach out and be like, hey, I'll give you $200, and you're like, I can make that doing something else, and I'm gonna risk losing my contract over $200. It's so a lot of it's to make sure that I'm getting paid what I'm worth, essentially, but also the fact that clients, it's for a safety thing too. So that way my agents can make sure that the client is liable, that they have a contract, they can't screw me over, making sure that they're reputable too, and it's not just some Joe Schmo that I'm gonna show up to and who knows what might happen. I mean, so there's a lot to it. But
can you give some examples, like what type of penalties you would pay? For example, not showing up or being sick or coming to your work late. Can you just give like some rough numbers?
So actually it's not money. You lose your contract. That's it.
Really?
You're dropped. I mean, yes, people are late. That happens. We're human. At that point, they'll just send you an email or a phone call and be like, Alyssa, you cannot do that with the client. Please do not do that again. I'm sure if it kept persisting, they would be like, okay, enough's enough. So your biggest penalty is getting dropped, which is huge because you want your contract. You don't want to get dropped from being represented with an agency. At this point too, I can't ever risk going against the rules that way, because if this is the agency that I want to be with. So if I got dropped, where do I go from here, right? So the penalty is just losing your contract. It's not a money thing.
Okay. So, for example, like if you're stuck in traffic, so one time it can be accepted.
Correct. That happened to me a few weeks ago. I was almost 30 minutes late because I got stuck in serious traffic. So, not my proudest moment, but it happens.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You apologize to the client. You let your agent know. I was okay, but don't make
it was
it
not
happen.
like a huge shoot. It was like not many people on the set, right?
And actually, it was. It
Really?
was, yeah.
And the entire crew was waiting for Alyssa.
Yes. Again, not my proudest moment.
Guys, don't do it like this.
Don't be late. Compensate an extra hour just to be safe.
And the last question, which all people are interested in, how much you paid for the shoot or for the catwalk, or like what at least some approximate numbers. I know that you might not be comfortable to talk about that. I would not, maybe, if I were you.
Yeah.
But I know that we want to know, and people want to know.
Fair. It's hard. Each agency is different. So every agency has a day rate. So for example, the very first agency I was with, the day rate was only $500. And that's for 7 to 8 hours. Again, just depending on each agency. So yeah, you can get $500 for the day. That was very typical with them. My agency now is very different. I can't disclose that, but I can disclose that, what I'm interested in as far as like runway and, high fashion stuff. Like you think of New York Fashion Week, Milan Fashion Week, Paris Fashion Week. Generally those you don't get paid for. That is just exposure and the experience to be able to walk for a designer, which
Really?
I think is so worth it. Yes, absolutely. Hop on a plane, write that expense off to New York, right off your hotel, and go walk for Alexander Wang. That's the dream setup for me. So I haven't done that yet. I will get there. But yeah, so it's just dependent too on the client. So if you have a client like, Groupon, as I used to have, they have somewhat of a budget, but it's not going to be very high. Versus if you're working for, if you worked for a big designer, obviously they have a much bigger budget to pay you. So it's very specific though. It's just client dependent.
Cool. Okay, guys, if you have some questions to Alyssa, you can send her message in Instagram. We're gonna put her Instagram here. And if you have some questions to me, you can put them down there in comment section. Don't forget to give us likes and don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe!
Yes, definitely subscribe. Thank you so much for answering all these questions.
Absolutely.
And,
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I wish you all the best.
Likewise.
Thank you. We are rolling.
We are rolling.
Yeah. Hi guys, today I have a friend of mine.
Start over. I was making funny faces at you. I was like, oh.